You know, something is terribly wrong when our great President Donald Trump and Israel's great Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu are relentlessly attacked by the media, the Democrat Party, so-called influencers, and the like, while the Iranian regime essentially gets a free pass. It's bizarre. The Iranian regime reversed all of the Western reforms the Shah had put in place, including women voting, women holding public office, equal rights for Christians and Jews, reducing the influence of the Islamic clerics in the government, land reforms, expansion of democratic processes, etc. See, people don't understand that the reason Khomeini and the Marxist left and the others went after the Shah is because the Shah was bringing modernity to Iran, and so they sought to overthrow him. It was called the White Revolution, and in doing so, the Shah actually emboldened and unleashed the left-wing intelligentsia, Marxist movements, democracy movements, and Islamic clerics, which joined a revolutionary effort to remove him because they saw an opportunity to exploit it. Most of them didn't agree with each other than trying to get rid of the Shah. In fact, most of them hated each other. Now, Khomeini condemned these reforms. He condemned the Shah's alliances with our country and the State of Israel and the rest of the West. He opposed all reforms involving women's rights, freedom for other religions, and so forth. And while Khomeini was attacking the Shah as a heretic with Muslim clerics and activists, providing them with recorded tapes of his speeches, meaning Khomeini's speeches, and his declarations and other messages, because he had been in France, where he was sent by the Shah a few years earlier because of his revolutionary intentions. What Khomeini did is he downplayed his rigid Islamist governance plans, convincing the secular intellectuals, the nationalists, the leftists, the Marxists, that they could all cooperate to oust the Shah, that they could do that first and decide how things turn out later once the revolution is complete. Khomeini was better organized than those other movements, even though he was overseas during the earlier phases of the revolution, but he returned to Iran to oversee the final phase. Jimmy Carter, pressured the Shah. The French pressured the Shah. The usual Western countries pressured the Shah to bring Khomeini back, so he does, which becomes a disastrous decision. Meanwhile, important Western and especially American media outlets wrote of Khomeini as this grandfatherly, soft-spoken, religious mystic focused on spiritual renewal rather than a brutal dictatorship. There were American officials who actually described Khomeini as the Gandhi of Iran. But he was none of that. The media have a bad pattern of romanticizing brutal, anti-Western and anti-American revolutionaries. Castro, Mao, Lenin, just to name a few. And early on, they did the same with Khomeini. That would soon change. I'm giving you this background so you understand what we're up against, ladies and gentlemen, because if I don't do it, it's not going to be done. After this revolution, Khomeini systematically eliminated his revolutionary partners through institutional purging and mass executions. He brutally marginalized and destroyed his secular, nationalist, leftist allies, one by one. He purged the universities of secular, Western elements. He arrested leaders of the various groups, forced them into televised confessions, and executed them, and dismantled all their organizations. Khomeini removed all the Ayatollahs and other clerics who held competing views. Several years later, he ordered the mass execution of all political prisoners, tens of thousands of them. And to make a long story short, while the Cold War ended in 1989, the Cold War with Russia, another geopolitical transformation was taking place in the Middle East, which had started 10 years earlier with Khomeini and that revolution, and this fundamentalist 7th century Islamist movement, requiring the political governance through Islamist orthodoxy, was spreading throughout the Middle East, including through surrogates, like Hezbollah, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, the Houthis. It included the Muslim Brotherhood, and so forth and so on. They were organized, trained, and funded by the Iranian regime. Lebanon, Yemen, Gaza, Iraq, Syria, and beyond, all affected, all infiltrated, with elements operating not only throughout the Middle East, but the world, including in our hemisphere. The Iranian Revolution has been seen as a pan-Islamic revolution, a pan-Islamic revolution. And today, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, is mandated by Iran's constitution to pursue, quote, an ideological mission of jihad in God's way, that is extending sovereignty of God's law throughout the world. The regime's ideology is a mix of political Islam and the Marxist oppressor-oppressed paradigm, but significantly defined through the ideology of the 7th century fundamentalist Islamist ideology. Eric Herodotus, writing in the Jerusalem News Syndicate, makes the important point, this is important, that the writings of Franz Fanon are particularly influential. Fanon argued that oppressed peoples could overcome materially stronger powers through sustained resistance, psychological transformation, and a willingness to endure suffering. In this framework, endurance becomes a form of power, and struggle itself can reshape both individuals and societies. So this is the mentality we're dealing with. People say we're bombing them, and we're bombing them, and we're bombing them again. What's going on? These ideas resonated across the developing world, including in the Middle East. And I contend it helps explains the resistance to the Iranian regime today. And that's why we need to arm a counter-resistance, a counter-revolution of oppressed Iranians, of Iranians who want liberation, and Iranians who want their pound of flesh because their family members were slaughtered. This is a resource that we need to take advantage of. And we need to help those people at the same time. That plus, and importantly, the ideological belief that it is compelled, the regime is compelled by Allah to destroy all barriers if the appearance of the 12th Imam is to occur. Now, I've talked about this before. Let me explain this just briefly. The 12th Imam, known as Muhammad al-Mahdi, is the final prophesied leader in the 12er Shia Islam, and this is what Khomeini believed in. Born in 868 CE in Samarra, Iraq, believers maintain he went into a miraculous hiding in 874 CE, and he remains alive today among us. He is expected to return at the end of times to help defeat evil, establish peace, and bring ultimate justice to the world. And the way for his appearance must be cleared by the elimination of all non-believers and all obstacles or barriers and their institutions, societies, and countries. You understand? That means the destruction of the world as it exists today, especially the West, especially the United States and Israel. Khomeini, and the Khomeini who just was killed, stated that it is official state policy to eliminate the United States and Israel. And when they use the terms big Satan and little Satan, they are Quranic monikers. Quranic monikers. You know, we hear this day in and day out, oh, big Satan, Lord, okay, you know, pass the coffee and the cookies. No. This has real meaning. They're telling us who they are. They're telling us what they believe. And as you can see, the disunity we have in our country in confronting the Iranian regime plays right into their hands. Right into their hands. They've always seen the West and us as weak. Not militarily weak, but as a people, they see us as weak. They believe we have neither the will nor the stomach to do what is required to defeat them, and that, in fact, they are unconquerable. They are invincible. They see our governing system with cyclical elections, separation of powers, checks and balances, constant debating and arguing, individual rights, etc., as self-defeating, as paralyzing, and ultimately suicidal for us. It is in this context that the Democrat Party, our media, and others are not only utterly irresponsible in their propaganda and actions to try and scuttle and sabotage our efforts to destroy this regime. They're trying to undermine the president and our armed forces in the face of this very dangerous enemy, and they're trying to do it for political purposes. But they are giving sustenance to the regime. They are giving it further energy, motivation, and encouragement. Yet there can be no question that nuclear weapons in the hands of the Iranian regime would ensure the catastrophic confrontation that these zealots believe they were put on earth to achieve. And while it may be unimaginable to believe this, that they would actually use nuclear weapons against our country with the purpose of obliterating tens of millions of us, that is exactly what they intend to do. The extent to which this is either not understood or is quickly dismissed as nonsense, given what is at stake, is inconceivable to me. It's mind-boggling to me. I can think of no other generation that would react with such feebleness as these objectors, as these saboteurs, in the face of such an existential threat, or worse, hold such contempt for a president who is taking serious action to try and prevent such devastation in our entire history. The first president to stand up to it. The evidence of the Iranian regime's intentions is indisputable. And I might add, the callousness with which so many of our fellow Americans see the mass slaughter of innocent Iranian people, and their children, young people, on a level that is truly indescribable, is shocking to me. I listen to some of our fellow Americans and I think, what has happened to us? Where's our conscience? Where's our soul? We don't even discuss these people anymore. I touched on this a little bit last evening. Marxism, I spent some time on that. I think it's important to continue to spend some time on these ideologies that are spreading, enemies within and without, the overlap between them and among them. Look, Marxism doesn't believe in a God, and obviously Islam does. But just like Khomeini said to his fellow revolutionaries who were not Islamists, oh, we'll figure all this out in the end. And he killed them all. Or like Stalin. Yeah, we'll figure all this out in the end. Lenin dies, and what does he do? He kills all of his competition, Trotsky and so forth. So they'll figure it out in the end. The problem is, it's too late for us when they're figuring things out in the end. That means their revolutions have succeeded. And I underscored yesterday that Marxism, unlike Americanism, has a final stage. What is the final stage of Americanism? What is the final stage of our society? Anybody know? There is no final stage. Humanity develops, humanity progresses. Each individual lives their life to the fullest, we hope. Some don't, but we do our best. It's about individuals. It's about humanity. It's about free will. It's not about some giant endgame where all of a sudden we have the paradise, where all of a sudden it's the greatest society on the face of the earth. If we could only remove the obstacles, and the obstacles are other human beings and other human institutions, people we may disagree with. That's what the Islamist belief system is. That's what the Marxist belief system is. Not to get too much in the weeds, but I do enjoy it, I must confess. We have Rousseau, Hegel, and Marx. And it's my contention that Marx plagiarized a little bit from Rousseau and a lot from Hegel, and then put his own twist on it. But sort of the thumbnail sketch of this, Rousseau talked about the rich and the poor, the elderly and the young, the sick and the healthy. He was a very depressed man during most of his life, but he was a brilliant man, obviously a philosopher, and he wrote that essentially at the end of all this, we'll have the type of society that is really beneficent, peaceful, wonderful, and so forth and so on. Of course, he never tells us when we get there, and he never tells us exactly where we're going. And then there's Hegel. There's Hegel, who basically talks about this constant battle, and these battles, these opposites. They keep battling each other, until at the end, the perfect wins out. Effectively, a perfect society, or this paradise develops. So here we have another end game. And then Marx says, okay, but really Hegel's not exactly right. What do we all live for? Food, sustenance. And how do we get there? Labor. And the problem is, all of history is about the oppressed and the oppressor. It's about the bourgeoisie taking advantage of the proletariat, the workers, the working class, the laborers. And of course, that's nonsense. But nonetheless, it's a defective ideology. And there he is. At the very end, what do we have? A worker's paradise. If only we can clear out the people who are the obstacle, the institutions are the obstacle. He even talks about in the Communist Manifesto about a period of despotism. Of course, the period of despotism under communism never ends, does it? And so there's always this grand society at the end of the rainbow with all this hell that takes place before we get there. Islam, or Islamists, Marxism, Hegelism, Rousseauism, but let's just stick Marxism, communism. Not Americanism. That is not what we believe. In the sovereignty of the individual, in the civil society, the sovereignty of individuals coming together voluntarily. No centralized government, centralized authority, masterminds who tell us what to believe. It's why we reject nationalism or populism, which is a phony sort of belief system, which leads to mobocracy. We believe in constitutionalism. In the Declaration, the most concise, formal statement of who we are, is probably the most superb document, as far as I'm concerned, that's ever been written. So, to circle back, the reason this president will go down in history for 1,000 years, the reason the Prime Minister of Israel will go down in history for 1,000 years, is because they saw the danger, and they stood up to the danger, and they're fighting the danger. And Donald Trump will go down in our history as one of the greatest presidents ever, because of what he is doing today, as well as other things that he's done, but certainly because of what he's doing today in dealing with this grave threat in Iran.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube, and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.